Anyway, guys, let's pick up with these notes. This is going to get even more interesting as we go along. Hopefully, you can see, though, from what we already discussed the other day on Tuesday, uh, these identifying marks, could not apply to anything else but the papacy. There's no question about it. The papacy is, biblically speaking, the papacy is the Antichrist. Anyway, but, the identifying marks we've already looked at make that point clear enough. But there's more. There's a lot more. So when you put all of this together, you step back, there's no doubt this, guys, is the reason why the Vatican, for hundreds of years, up until 1965, only officially then at Vatican II, was this list canceled, eradicated. But up until 1965, officially, you could not own the Bible or read the Bible, even though Bibles by that time were readily available to Catholics, the Douay version. But technically speaking, up until then, this list of forbidden books was still in effect. They weren't burning you at the stake for violating it anymore, but they certainly were in earlier centuries. You were burned at the stake if you were caught in possession of not only a Bible, but even just one page thereof. That's all you needed to do, is have just one page of it in your possession. You would go before the Inquisitor. They would torture you and burn you at the stake. What did they have against the Bible? Why did they want the Bible out of the hands of the average layperson? Because of these Antichrist prophecies, obviously. Other reasons, too. You would be able to see that, hey, wait a minute, this whole idea of bowing before statues and worshiping them, praying to them, this is against what the Bible teaches. This idea of exalting Mary to goddess status, calling her Queen of Heaven. There's nothing in the Bible about this. In fact, the only time we have the term Queen of Heaven used in the Bible at all is in the Old Testament, where the Israelites were condemned for worshiping a mother goddess called the Queen of Heaven. It's obvious why they didn't want this book in circulation. It doesn't put them in a very good light. The royal bloodline who brought us the Bible knew this, and initially the Bible, the Old Testament, was written by the priestly bloodline. But as time went on, things reversed. The royal bloodline wound up, they brought us the New Testament and wound up preserving both testaments together. And, now the priestly bloodline, run by the Catholic Church, wanted the thing suppressed, wanted it destroyed. Only wanted it in the hands of the priests so they could selectively read. And to this day, guys, that's what they do. Roman Catholic priests selectively read Bible passages. The neutral ones that aren't controversial and won't stir up any questions. Most Catholics do not read. Of course, most Protestants too, or a good many of them don't read the Bible either. They only read it in so much as, what's in that sermon for the day. Most of them don't read, or a good many of them anyway, don't read it. The ones who do, of course, are only reading it in the light of what their religious dupe leaders tell them. They interpret it in the context of the prefabricated interpretations that are handed to them on a silver platter. If they really were to read the damn thing and formulate their own, what you used to call common sense opinions, they not only wouldn't believe the crap the church is telling them and, informing them on how to interpret it, they wouldn't believe the book at all. They wouldn't be able to. To read the Bible as it is to reject it. That's it. Plain and simple. So again, understand when we read these prophecies, all we're looking at is one tribal faction vying for power against another tribal faction. Nevertheless, though, it is very interesting to see how the Catholic Church is raked over the coals in this book, and for good reason, guys. It is an abomination. So is the royal bloodline, but nevertheless, their scathing review of the papal power in the form of these Antichrist prophecies, it's all true and all justified. Here's another passage to make note of, Revelation 17:5. Here, John said that this false, corrupt, and corrupting whore of a church located in Rome, the city of seven hills, the one drunk with the blood of the saints and the martyrs, that this church was associated with Babylon. He said, and upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon, the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. To make this comparison between the Catholic Church and ancient Babylon is very interesting, because the royal bloodline associated with Christ and his Davidic lineage was adamantly opposed to the Talmudic style beliefs and practices that crept into Judaism during the Babylonian captivity. So they came to view Babylon as evil, even though, guys, it was their own, a good many of their own priests that had adopted these practices themselves. They don't blame their priests, they blame Babylon. But nevertheless, it was the influence that they got from Babylon, the so-called pagan influence that corrupted their pure religion. And so, to this day, Babylon is looked back as something evil because of the book of Revelation's comparison between this whore and Babylon. I remember as an Adventist years ago, they would refer to all the other churches out there, except the Adventist church, of course, as Babylon. They're all part of Babylon. So, in the mind of so many Christian dupes, Babylon represents something evil. But if you look back at ancient Babylon, guys, there's nothing evil about it at all. Just like when you look back at ancient Rome. Sure, there were some leaders corrupt here and there. Every frickin' nation on earth has had that. But as a whole, Rome was, a golden age for mankind. And so was Babylon. Babylon was a great city, a great empire. Like Rome, you pissed them off. Sure, they'd snuff you out, but, can you blame them? But, they brought peace, they brought prosperity, tranquility everywhere they went. Just don't piss them off. That's how an empire lasts. You're ruthless with your enemies. But those that don't cause you trouble, they reap the rewards, of being under a mighty, wealthy empire. Yeah, everybody lived comfortable, prosperous lives. Anyway, but, along comes the tribe and demonizes these empires because they were a problem for them, which usually meant, you won't let us rape and pillage you. Don't forget, guys, while on the one hand, they befriended these empires one minute and helped to fund them, the next minute they're turning on them and helping another empire rise up to overthrow that. And then later they turned on that empire, supported another one to overthrow that. On and on it went. Unbelievable, man. They finally realized, okay, this isn't working. We're not going to fund any more empires. That's why Rome was the last empire. Now they emerged as the empire. They ran the royal families. They were the royal families. They ran the religious arm too. One branch ran the royal families. The other one ran the Catholic Church. Usually they were fighting behind the scenes, sometimes openly, against themselves. Other times they cooperated, when it suited their mutual interests. They especially cooperated when this third faction emerged. In fact, they were hoping to snuff out this third faction altogether when they went after the Templars. 1307, both the royal bloodline and the priestly bloodline, the papacy joined ranks with the King of France at the time to snuff out the Templars. It didn't work, though. They just went underground, regrouped, and formed a multiplicity of other secret societies. And ultimately, they did accomplish their goal. They diffused both the royal and the priestly bloodline. They emerged as the dominant force. And to this day, they're the dominant force. The Catholic Church is now starting to pick up. Oh, yeah, it's losing members like all other churches are. But its power is picking up. More and more money is being funneled into the Vatican Bank, and that's really all you need in this world for power, isn't it? More money. It is re-emerging, guys, as a dominant force in the world, in case you haven't noticed. And the popularity of His Holiness is growing by leaps and bounds. He's playing the cool, politically correct game, isn't he? He's making everybody happy. He's loosening up standards, traditional, church standards on homosexuality, for example, loosening up standards on evolution. Several popes, the last few successive popes, have been doing that. They want to win over the respect and admiration of all sectors of society, being real smooth, so everyone embraces him and recognizes him as a great world leader, even if they aren't Catholic, even if they aren't religious. We're seeing a lot of world religious leaders turning to the Pope. Like I said, the goddamn Dalai Lama. Just about every major Protestant denomination has sent their church president or other church top-notch representatives to the Vatican to meet with the Pope over the years. All of them are embracing him. Other religions also have embraced the Pope. Muslim leaders have met with His Not-So-Holiness. It's pretty obvious what's going on here, guys. John Paul II himself, and we'll look at some of these quotes later, but he stated he was all for the New World Order, as did Francis and Benedict, and they've all named it by name. Francis recently hailed this idea of, open borders, allowing foreigners to come into your country en masse. This is great. It's all a part of Jesus's brotherly love, isn't it? Yeah, whatever. They have no qualms with allowing Rome to regain at least some of its power that it once had, guys, because they completely control it now. It's under the control of the secret society / banking cabal. The third wave. The third way, as they call it. Anyway, the parallels between Rome and ancient Babylon are striking. And so thus, this whore is called the whore of Babylon, because a lot of the ancient, quote, pagan practices of Babylon are endorsed by the Catholic Church. The very origin of a lot of Catholic doctrine comes from Babylon. For example, I've talked about this quite a bit in the past, but let's just review some of these points now in this context. Both have elaborate temple rituals, or I should say the Vatican, the Catholic Church, has elaborate temple rituals, which ancient Babylon once had, involving candles, incense, sunburst monstrances, containing a round little cookie, the little round wafer that's magically transformed into a deity. The ancient Babylonians, guys, the ancient Babylonian priests, you can see them depicted in the artwork of ancient Babylon on temple walls and whatnot. Priests holding up a monstrance, a stick with a sunburst on top of it, and in the center is the round wafer that they would eat, that they claimed transformed, once blessed by the priest, into the sun god. And when you ate this little round wafer, you were eating your god, the sun god, Marduk in the case of Babylon. In the case of Catholicism, you're eating Jesus, the God-man. Not so much anymore, but in the past, guys, the Jesus cookie, as I call it, the host was always round, and it was put into a monstrance, a stick with a sunburst, these beams of light radiating out in every direction, and the round wafer in the middle, just like in ancient Babylon, represented the sun, or as the Catholic Church would like to say, the S-O-N, the Son of God. Here's another similarity. The liturgy performed in an ancient language unknown to the common people. The ancient Babylonians did it. The Catholic Church, for the longest time, did it until more recent decades, Vatican II. Now it's in the common language for the most part. There's still a few straddler conservative Catholic Church that practice the Mass in Latin, but most of them do it now. But anyway, up until Vatican II, all Catholic churches did that. They all had the Mass performed in Latin, so nobody understood what the hell the priest was even saying. Can you imagine? Most Catholics did not speak Latin. Probably 99% of them. So you would go to church every week. In fact, you went pretty much every day, and you would have to sit through this monotoned, lethargic, sleep-inducing, coma-inducing diatribe, which you didn't even understand because it was in a foreign, dead language, just like the ancient Babylonian priests did. Both practiced, processions of divine images. Ancient Babylon would parade their divine images through the streets. People would run up and pin money or put money in the pockets of the robes that these statues were wearing. The same with the Catholic Church, guys. They pin money to statues of Mary and they parade her through the streets. All right, welcome back, guys. I saw the movie again last night, Spotlight. If you haven't seen that, you need to check it out. It's actually really good. They did a pretty damn good job. I had forgotten at the end they gave a list of other cities around the world that have had. That movie is about the scandal in Boston of the pedophile priest and how the church was lying and covering it up for decades on end. That literally, hundreds of priests. I think they said in the end, 1,000 priests over the years were known to have molested kids in Boston, the Boston, diocese. 1,000. And they said, anyway, they said that on average, 6%, I bet it's a freaking lot higher than that, but nevertheless, 6% of all priests are pedophiles. Oh, that's freaking great. But guys, like I said, can you really expect otherwise? From a system that suppresses the natural sexual tendencies that every person has, when you suppress that, it's going to, look what happens. You put a bunch of men in prison, you lock them up for years and years on end where they don't have any means of expressing those natural sexual desires. What's going to happen? They're going to become perverted and corrupted, and then ugh. Christ, when I think of it, that's so goddamn disgusting. But that's what happens, guys. They wind up. I don't care how horny I got. I'll lock myself in my cell and have sex with my hand. I couldn't fathom. Just the thought of being with a frickin' man is the most disgusting. I just can't fathom it. I have sympathy, for the non-militant gays, that have those tendencies. I can understand, things happen to them in their childhood that screws up their sexuality, and I can sympathize, but me personally, I can't fathom it. You understand what I'm saying? It's just, I think men are gross. I really do. A bunch of hairy frickin' apes. And I frankly don't understand what women see in men. I'm glad women like men. But I honestly don't see, people will say, oh, look at that. Oh, he's a good looking guy, isn't he? And I'm like, no, men aren't good looking to me. Anyway, but that is what happens with a lot of men. They're locked in prison for years on end, and yeah, they wind up, yeah, whatever. My point is, when you suppress the natural sexual desires that we all have, they're going to corrupt one way or another. And so this is what you have in La Católica Church. It's what you've always had. They either become pedophiles, or you hear stories of them, getting it on with various women in the church. They don't care if they're married or not, get them in the confessionals. And if they can't get them willingly, there's been rapes many, many times through the centuries. Also, another way that they've released their sexual proclivities, guys, has been through the nunneries. There's been many, many horror stories that have surfaced over the years. Nuns describing how, I mentioned that Sister Charlotte. There's Maria Monk, many, many other nuns over the centuries who escaped the cloistered convent. They're like prisons. They keep you locked away, never to see the light of day again. They had to sneak out, find some way, plan it out meticulously, because if you get caught, they will kill you. I described how a lot of these nunneries have, pits dug in the basements with lime, where they would throw the bodies and the lime would dry them out, and so that you wouldn't smell the rotting corpses below. But anyway, many nuns have escaped from convents like this and described how priests would come in and get it on with them. And if they refused, again, they'd be locked away. So they would break their resistance. And then you would be let out if you agreed, to have sex with these priests. If you didn't, they'd lock you away again and then let you out. If you didn't get the message after 3 or 4 times, you were dead. That's all there is to it. They would kill you. No one would ever hear from you again. No one would ever know that you were killed. Anyway, but those are just a few examples of how priests have been able to maintain their celibacy. They maintain it by releasing their sexual frustrations in corrupt and perverted ways. That's how they maintain it, guys. When you see a Catholic priest who boasts of his chastity, rest assured, 99% of them, guys, they're releasing that sexual tension elsewhere, somehow. Is he gay? A lot of priests are gay. They're getting it on with other priests. Or they're having the little flings on the side with sister this or that, one of the nuns, or someone in the confessional. Or they're pedophiles. Ancient Babylonian priests did the same thing. The idea of celibacy incites in the mind of the duped masses of the congregation that this makes this person holier than everybody else. He's above us. Why? He can resist, sexual temptations that everyone else is plagued with. No, sorry, they're not. They're not. They're venting that out in some other way. It's not a question of are they doing it? It's a question of how are they doing it and who are they doing it with? They're getting some kind of sexual satisfaction somewhere, guys. This is why you have some really liberal Catholic churches that do have the priests getting married. Of course, they're not officially sanctioned by the Vatican. They're rebel churches. But, they recognize this law is frickin' ridiculous. It actually isn't even in the Bible. Paul makes a suggestion implying that, it would be a good idea if you can do it. But if you're going to burn with lust, don't do it. But it's not made a, quote, requirement like it is in the Catholic Church. Yet another thing they inherited from the ancient Babylonian priesthood. There's the Catholic springtime festival, i.e. Easter, preceded by a 40-day fasting period. Guys, in ancient Babylon, you had the same thing. That's where they got it from. The ancient Babylonians had a 40-day feast period or fasting period in the spring, which culminated in their little fertility festival. That's all Easter is, guys. That's why you have the Easter bunny. The bunny rabbit has always been a fertility symbol. So that has stayed with us down through the centuries, associated with Easter, or the celebration of Ishtar, which is where the word Easter comes from. God damn, the thing is as pagan as you can get. Like everything else in this frickin' professed Christian religion. It is not a Christian religion, folks. It is an antichrist religion. And by antichrist, I mean in the place of Christ. In the Catholic Church, you don't confess your sins to Jesus. You shouldn't be confessing your sins to anybody anyway, except to the people that you've directly wronged. But biblically speaking, if you're going to confess your sins, it's supposed to be to Jesus, to Yahweh Jr. But in the Catholic Church, you confess to a priest. So there you have the perfect definition of Antichrist. The priest is the Antichrist, or the replacement Christ. Anti in the Greek means in place of. Anyway, you also had in ancient Babylon a virgin mother goddess who intercedes for her worshipers, just like you have in the Catholic Church with Mary. You have a calendar of holy days and seasons in the Catholic Church, just like the Babylonians did. The Babylonians had a feast day dedicated, to this, that, or the other pagan god for every day of the year. Every day of the year was dedicated to at least one pagan deity. And so it is in the Catholic Church, guys. Every day of the year is technically a holy day because every day of the year is dedicated to a saint. There's a saint for every day of the year. Just like there's a saint for everything that you can fathom that you would need an intercessor for, supposedly, You got a saint for traveling mercies, a saint for lost items, a saint for a boo-boo on your wee-wee, again, just on and on and on. There's a saint for everything under the sun. And so it was with ancient Babylon, guys. They had a saint, if you will, or a god for everything you could fathom that could go wrong, that you could turn to that particular god for when something, when anything went wrong. There was a god for that. Rome parallels in every detail the ancient Babylonian religion. There's the orientation of temples toward the east and praying toward the east. Roman Catholic churches. I don't know if they still do it today, but throughout most of the history of the Catholic Church, Roman churches, Roman Catholic cathedrals were always built facing toward the east. And why? Because, again, it is a sun-worshiping cult. The magic round Jesus cookie in the monstrance, the sunbeam monstrance. Christ almighty. You can't get more pagan than that. Again, I don't care, pagan, whatever. But the idea is, in the Bible, guys, that paganism is evil. The whole religion of the Bible is pure paganism, just revamped, repackaged. But nevertheless, the Catholic Church is blatant, in your face paganism. It's not It's not Christian, especially when it comes to, the veneration of images. Anyway, there's, the ecclesiastical chant, the priest's bell, prayers for the dead, prayers to the dead. All of this comes from ancient Babylon, and you see it in La Católica Church on a grand scale. The use of magical implements such as scapular medals, holy water, and rosary beads. The ancient Babylonians used all of these things, all of them. No wonder she's called the whore of Babylon. It's telling you that her teachings, her practices, are going to parallel those of ancient Babylon. Rome's practices and teachings do parallel those of ancient Babylon. She does sit on the city of seven hills. She is drunk with the blood of the saints and the martyrs. She does deck herself with gold and precious stones, on and on and on and on. Meets every single identifying mark. She is universal. The word Catholic means universal. But there's more. There's more identifying marks. In the last passage we just read, Revelation 17:5, notice how this whore was called the mother of harlots. Once again, guys, many churches have broken away from the Catholic Church, right? Look at the Protestant Reformation. All of these churches are called harlots, according to the book of Revelation. But she is the mother of all of these harlots. She's the mother from whom they broke away. Today, though, those broken away churches aren't broken away anymore, are they? Through ecumenism, and even ones that aren't meeting with local Catholics for joint worship services, they have a profound fondness for the Pope, and they accept the Catholic Church as just another Christian church. They're ripe for the picking. If Rome does in fact emerge more dominantly as it has in the past, most Protestant churches are going to go right along with her, follow right in suit. John said that all nations have been made drunk through the wine of this harlot's fornication. In other words, through her corruption and infidelity, they've been made to, follow right along and align themselves with her. That's a perfect description of what's going on today. Revelation 18:3, here's how it's worded. For all the nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, have partaken in her corruptions. John further stated that this corrupt church would live deliciously and would glorify herself. Revelation 18:7 says, how much she has glorified herself. Guys, once again, this is a precise description of the Catholic Church. The arrogance of this enterprise, boasting of its power, boasting that it has never erred in matters of faith and morals. I've read these quotes many times in the past. How much she has glorified herself. Oh, yes, that's Rome for you. The most arrogant, boastful bitch of an institution ever to curse the face of this planet. I can't remember if I finished the point I was making a minute ago about the movie last night. The Spotlight. At the end, they flashed on the screen several other cities where pedophile priests there's been not just one priest, but multiple priests. Major pedophile priest scandals have broken open. Guys, they listed at least 120, 130 cities. I didn't get a count. It went by too fast, but I'll have to rent that movie sometime and freeze frame it and do a count. Hundreds of cities, or at least 130, whatever, well over 100 cities. Or it might even have been 200. It was a pretty big list. Around the world have had, and that's just the ones that get exposed. How many other times these things have happened that don't get exposed. And how long has this been going on, guys? I'll argue it's been going on from day one. Only through mass communications has it become more well known to the general public today. It was much easier to cover this up in past centuries. It's always been this way, guys. How many multiplied millions of people have been victimized? Millions of kids have been victimized and remain victimized into their adult lives. Once something like that happens to you, it's with you for life. The scars it leaves are with you for life. And it has adverse effects on you that some victims aren't even aware of, don't become aware of until years later. It's, in a sense, it's worse than murder, ladies and gentlemen. Child molestation is worse than murder in the sense that when you murder someone, it's over with. They don't suffer anymore. But when you do something like this that psychologically damages them, it's with them for life. They suffer for the rest of their life because of it. That's worse than murder. Look at the abominations of this bitch of an institution. This whore is called the mother of all abominations of the earth. Imagine that. Is that not an accurate description of this abominable enterprise? The mother of abominations. It is, guys. You know, just like I said, if you don't recognize Christianity as a toxic, abominable bitch of a religion, you don't understand it. If you don't recognize the Vatican and the Catholic Church as a detestable, abominable enterprise, you don't understand it. You don't have the slightest clue about what Catholicism is, what it's about, what it's always been about, and the horrific crimes it has committed all down through the centuries and continuing right up into our modern era. If you think it's a benign institution, an admirable institution, a moral institution, yes, there are and have been moral priests and nuns and monks, and there have been moral Catholic Church members, of course, and there still are. But the institution itself, give me a frickin' break. God damn it, guys. It is an abomination. I have to agree with the Royal Bloodlines assessment there. Again, they're an abomination too, but their assessment of this enterprise, and they were only condemning the evils of the Catholic Church, by the way, because they were competition for them, not because they really detested the evil things they were doing. The royal bloodline was doing their share of abominable, detestable filth too. I actually have a set of notes put together on that. In fact, I'm going to make a note of that right now before I forget. I think I'll follow this show up with that, just so you can see the abominations of the royal bloodline. Some of the things that the kings and emperors of Europe and the queens have pulled over the centuries are absolutely despicable, disgusting, detestable, unbelievable, guys. So even though I can tip my hat to their assessment of the Catholic Church, once again, guys, their record is no better. So when you see them exposing the crimes of the Vatican through these Antichrist prophecies, understand once again, their crimes are just as bad. Yeah, I'm definitely going to do that. I'm going to follow this show up with a discussion of the royal bloodline and their crimes down through the centuries. Products of incest nutbags is all they've been, guys, all through the centuries. Psychopaths, literally. Most kings and queens of Europe down through the centuries have been raging psychopaths. And why? Because they're a bunch of products of incest. Tribe members. Most of them have had tribal blood flowing in their veins, if not fully Jewish, at least partly. Anyway, John further stated that this corrupt church would live deliciously and would, I think I just read that, didn't I? Yeah, how much, well, here it is, Revelation 18:7. How much she has glorified herself and lived deliciously. In other words, indulging herself in the finest finest foods, finest costly array. Just look at the cathedrals, guys. Not just in Europe, in this country too. You won't find anything like that in the Protestant churches. The finest artworks, gold laden this, gold laden that. Everything is overlaid with gold, precious stones. Go to the Vatican. Goddamn emeralds and rubies all over the damn place. Look at the Pope's tiara. There's got to be several $1 million worth of gems in that goddamn thing. Just that alone. The bulk of the world's wealth has always been in her hands, guys, all down to the centuries, and apparently still to this day. The Vatican is said by the CIA fact book to have the most holdings of any bank in the world. I don't doubt that one frickin' moment. More than the Rothschilds. And why? Because they've been ripping people off for a lot longer than the Rothschilds. And they do so under the guise of religion. You won't get people to empty their pockets willingly and gleefully more than in the context of religion. Nothing else will get them to empty their pockets more quickly. Especially when you have them believe that they're going to attain forgiveness of sins and assurance of heaven. The sale of indulgences, guys, all through the Dark Ages, the Middle Ages. Boy, did they sucker the masses with that one. Rome's coffers are and always have been overflowing. So this description here of a corrupt church that resides in the city of Seven Hills, i.e. Rome, God damn it, could you possibly apply this to anything else? How much she has glorified herself, boasting of the power she has, power over kings, boasting of how pure and incorruptible she is. Oh, yeah, give me a goddamn break. Give me a break. She boasts she's never erred in matters of faith and morals. How much she has glorified herself and lived deliciously. So much torment and sorrow give her, it says. For she says in her heart, I sit a queen and am no widow and shall see no sorrow. That is the attitude, and ever has been, of the Vatican, isn't it? I sit a queen, crowned. I'm the ruler. That's always been Rome's boast, that she has power over the kings, right? And am no widow. The Catholic Church claims to be the bride of Christ. All right, guys, welcome back. Anyway, once again, if any church has lived deliciously, it is the Roman Church. If any church has boasted, I am a queen and am no widow and shall see no sorrow, it is the Roman Church. Down through the ages, her hierarchy has indulged itself in finer luxuries than most kings could ever dream of. And to this day, she remains one of the richest, if not the richest organizations on the planet. I would argue, yes, the richest. Anyway, the Roman Church has indeed boasted, again, she's no widow, claiming to be the bride of Christ. Further along this line, John wrote, and saying, alas, alas, that great city that was clothed in fine linen and in purple and scarlet, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls. What city is like unto this great city? Revelation 18:16 and 18. She's decked with gold and precious stones. Is that not the Vatican? But do notice, she's decked in purple and scarlet. Those colors, my friends, are the two chief colors of the bishops and cardinals of the Roman Church: purple and scarlet. Always have been. Do we need any more proof? But there is more. John went on to tell us even more about the indulgences of this church. He said, and the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones, and having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. Filled with abominations. Revelation 17:4 says, and the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet. Oh, you know what? How did I do that? I quoted the same verse twice in a row. Sorry about that. Anyway. Filled with abominations, guys. Anyway, in verse 18 of chapter 17, John wrote, and the woman which thou sawest, this is supposed to be Gabriel talking to John, is that great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. Once again, guys, is that not the Roman Church? What whore, what false church do we know in history that has reigned over the kings of the earth? Hello? This can't be applied to anything else but La Vaticana. When Pope Gregory became Pope in 1073, he drew up a dictatus or list of 27 theses outlining his powers as Pope. I quoted this a few weeks back when I talked about, the claims of power that the Catholic Church has made over the centuries. But let me repeat this now in this context. Is the Catholic Church also a power that has claimed to exercise authority over kings? Here's what this list stated. This Pope, Gregory VII, claimed, and he was a Jew, by the way, he claimed that he alone is entitled to imperial insignia, that he can dethrone emperors and kings and absolve their subjects from allegiance, that all princes are obliged to kiss his feet. I mean, it's freaking unbelievable. Obliged to kiss his feet. To this day, guys, if not the Pope's feet, you do kiss his ring. Any dignitary, including U.S. presidents who meet with the Pope, are obliged and do, in fact, kiss his ring, a sign of submission to his divine authority. Give me a frickin' break. If I ever met the bastard and there was any kissing involved, it would be his lips to my ass. That would be the kissing. What a frickin' joke. Give me a break, this goddamn corrupt piece of shit. This bastard, by the way, don't forget, Pope Francis worked with the CIA back in the late 70s and early 80s. He sat in on torture sessions, ladies and gentlemen. Papal history is resplendent with accounts of this type of power-hungry church meddling in the affairs of the state. In the year 1204, for example, Pope Innocent III extracted from Peter II, King of Aragon, the following oath. Listen to this. I, Peter, King of Aragonians, profess and promise to be ever faithful and obedient to my Lord, Pope Innocent, to his Catholic successors and the Roman Church, and faithfully to preserve my kingdom in his obedience, defending the Catholic faith and persecuting heretical pravity wherever it may be found. Unbelievable. Many kings swore such oaths like this down through the centuries. Speaking of the influence of the Roman Church over the state during the Dark Ages, Malachi Martin wrote in his book, The Keys of This Blood, quote, "No ruler could take command, no government could govern, no commerce could function without the spiritual blessing and the imperial nod of the Roman pontiff." And you're going to tell me the tribe didn't have complete control over this enterprise all during the Dark Ages? Do you think they would allow that kind of power to be amassed in the hands of a few without them, are you frickin' kidding? The reason they had that power was because they created this bitch of an institution in the first place for that purpose. To this day, guys, the papacy infiltrates its way into world affairs. In the movie last night, again, I highly recommend you see it if you haven't seen it already. It's still playing in some theaters, if you have any locally owned theaters anymore. I still have a couple of them. They're very rare, but still a couple of them near me, where they play films that were out several months ago. We saw it when it first came out, and then we went and saw it again last night at one of these local theaters that it only cost like $5 or something. We thought, let's go see it again. Anyway, one of the scenes in there was very interesting. This lawyer was talking to one of the reporters that was, working on this story. And he said, "Oh, yes, these documents were released years ago, but they're now under lock and key. They never got published. They were released, but the public never saw them because once they were released, the Catholic Church swooped down and ordered them locked away, and so the court complied." And the guy's like, "What do you mean? How can they do that? How did they get away with that?" The lawyer said, "I'm not paranoid. I'm speaking from personal experience when I tell you that the Catholic Church controls everything in Boston and probably in other cities as well. But I can tell you from my experience as a lawyer in this city, they control everything. When they want something done, they get it." You got to see the movie. It's very good. That's a very true and highly accurate statement, ladies and gentlemen. And it's always, 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 did I mention always? It's always been this way. La Vaticana has always gotten the state to bend to her wishes. You don't think the tribe has been behind that the whole time? Or at least the priestly bloodline segment of the tribe. As former Catholic priest Peter DeRosa once wrote in the book Vicars of Christ, The Dark Side of the Papacy, he said, "The Catholic Church is the only religious body in existence that is both church and political organization. This is why it alone among churches exchanges diplomatic representatives and claims recognition as an independent member of the community of nations. It does this not as a small state, the Vatican, but as a worldwide religious organization," which is why, again, you have the symbolism of the whore riding on the back of the beast. This religious institution, this church, uses her secular power through the Vatican state to do her bidding and advance her interests around the world. Returning to the book of Daniel for a moment, this next passage, which is often interpreted as yet another prophecy of the Antichrist, makes this interesting statement, which, once again, guys, can only exclusively apply to the Vaticana. This is Daniel 11, verse 38. It says, "But in his estate," his meaning this evil entity, the papacy, "in his estate shall he honor the God of forces." God of forces. It's a reference, guys, to the goddamn Crusades and all the other wars that were waged under her auspice. "Shall honor a God of forces, and a God whom his fathers knew not shall he honor with gold and silver, and with precious stones and pleasant things. It will honor a God his fathers knew not with gold and precious things. Look at all the images in the Catholic churches, but especially of the Trinity, which is a God its fathers knew not. The original God of Christianity was one single individual, not three. The Trinity in Catholic art, represented with gold and precious things, and pearls and gems, was frequently represented, especially in early Catholic art, as one person with three faces on the one head. You ever seen some of these hideous images? My God, Roman Catholic art, guys, has got to be some of the most vomit-inducing, hideous, profoundly disgusting artistic representations you've ever set your eyes on. Gory-looking crap. There's a Catholic retreat center not too far from me where, people can go, individuals or families, whatever, can go and spend a whole week. They have these hiking trails. I guess they do different classes on, stress management or marriage counseling, whatever, blah, blah, blah. It's, a retreat center. Get away from it all. Anyway, there's, I've been there, I hiked around on their trails, just curious, looking around. It's open. Anybody can go in there. It's not locked up. Anyway, I was just curious to see what was there. Sure enough, me and a friend went one time, and I couldn't believe some of the frickin' hideous goddamn statues they have. There's one, it's metallic, and I guess it's supposed to be Christ dueling it out with the devil. But the horrific expression on the face of this devil, he's got claws and horns and fangs, and my God, it's so goddamn over the top, just demonic, evil looking. People bring their kids there to look at stuff like this. It's just like the Gibson film, The Passion. That's the most disgusting, blood-laden, violent film you ever want to set your friggin' eyes on. And Christians get off on it, guys. They soil their panties over this stuff. It's mind-blowing. But anyways, another good representation here of this whore in Daniel 11:38. Worships a different God that their fathers knew not. Yeah, this triune entity that it represents with gold and precious stones, blah, 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 blah. The Trinity has often been represented in Catholic art with gold and precious things, but absolutely hideous. I've seen other representations where it's one person with three heads, or again, one head with three faces. Absolutely ridiculous. Anyway, let's see. Moving on here, back to Revelation, chapter 18, verses 3 and 9. John described the kings of the earth fornicating with this whore. It says, with whom the kings of the earth committed fornication. This now, again, it's the, it's the royal bloodline writing this stuff. But it's talking here in condemnation of other kings that it knows has, slept with this whore, if you will, engaged in all kinds of sleazy wheelings and dealings. What they're saying here is shame on those other kings that have done this. You see the same thing in chapter 18, verses 3 and 9. They're condemning these other kings that have done this. Yes, indeed. During the Dark Ages, especially, in the medieval period, you had the kings of the earth fornicating with, engaging in all kinds of illicit relations with the church. There were times when they were fighting back and forth with each other, but there were times where, they collaborated back and forth. I just read you an example where a king pledged allegiance to the Pope. I'll persecute heretical pravity. I'll, execute my office as king under your divine guidance, Holy Father. Yeah, whatever. Daniel foresaw the false papal doctrine of the celibacy of the clergy guys in Daniel 11:37. Listen to what he wrote. Neither shall he regard the God of his fathers. Again, this is another reference to the Trinity, obviously, right? Nor the desire of women, nor regard any God, for he shall magnify himself above all. That's Rome. Rome has indeed magnified itself above all, hasn't it? But notice, it says, he shall not regard the desire of women, at least not openly. Openly, the Catholic Church professes celibacy, doesn't it? For its priesthood, its popes, its cardinals, its bishops. They have no desire for women, so we're supposed to think. Behind closed doors in the confessionals, it's been another story, but check it out, guys. Could this be talking, once again, about anything but the papacy? To further show that the whore of Revelation is a religious institution, John stated that once God destroys this institution, there wouldn't be heard anymore the voice of bride or bridegroom in her, or the light of a candle seen in her anymore. Here's how it's worded in verse 23 of Revelation 18. And the light of a candle shall shine no more at all in thee. You'd be hard-pressed to find a Catholic church anywhere on earth that isn't loaded with hundreds, if not thousands, of lit candles all over the place. No more shall a lit candle be seen at all in thee. And the voice of bride and bridegroom shall be heard no more at all in thee. Has to be a religious institution now, right? Of course it is. It's an impure woman, a whore, an impure church. For the merchants, listen to this. For thy merchants were the great men of the earth. Dominican friars like Tetzel guys who sold indulgences. Your merchants are the great men of the earth. The merchants selling the goddamn indulgences. What other church has merchants who have been the great men of the earth like she has? For by thy sorceries were all nations deceived. Ooh. Once again, guys, sorry, nobody else fits the bill like the Roman Church. We're also told that this power would have a mouth speaking great things. Daniel 7:8 says, a mouth speaking very great things. Daniel 7:20 says, a mouth that spake very great things. Daniel 7:25 says, and he shall speak great words against the Most High, meaning God. Revelation 13:1 says, and upon his heads was the name of blasphemy. Revelation 13:5 says, and there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies. Revelation 13:6 says, and he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle and them that dwelt in heaven. Likewise, in 2 Thessalonians 2, another chapter that deals with the Antichrist power, Paul said that this entity would speak against God by usurping his alleged authority. 2 Thessalonians 2:4 words it like this, who opposes himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he, as God, sits in the temple or cathedral of God, showing himself that he is God. Have the popes done this? Have they sat in what's supposed to be the temple of God, showing themselves that they're God? putting themselves up in place of God? Yeah, they have. I've read numerous quotes in the past, guys. Lucius Ferraris says that the Pope is King of Kings and Lord of Lords, to whom has been given plenitude of power over the heavenly as well as the earthly and the nether regions. So that if it were possible and an angel could err in the faith, he might be judged and excommunicated by the Pope. So the Catholic Church claims that the Pope has power to excommunicate angels. Isn't this what Revelation is talking about when it's and Paul too was talking about when they said that he shall magnify himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he as God sits in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. That's what Antichrist means, putting yourself up in the place of Christ, right? They put themselves in the place of Christ, claiming to forgive sins, claiming that there's no salvation outside of the church. So now you get salvation not from Christ, but from this church. The church is what gives you salvation. Yeah. It's done everything here that these passages say it would do. Daniel said the same thing in Daniel 11:36 and 37, where he wrote, "And the king," the Pope, "shall do according to his will, and he shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods, and shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished. Neither shall he regard the God of his fathers, nor regard any god, for he shall magnify himself above all." There you go. Catholic Church all the way. Anyway, let's see here. This is the same thing, by the way, that Lucifer is supposed to have said, as recorded in Isaiah 14:14. Lucifer is supposed to be speaking here and saying, "I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High." So in this prophecy, where it says, it would speak great words against the Most High and magnify itself above all that is called God, the royal bloodline, not that they really cared about, the Christian religion, but they knew that those who read these prophecies and understood them would clearly identify the papacy as the fulfillment of these, quote, prophecies. And that's exactly what happened in the Protestant Reformation, guys. The Catholic Church was portrayed as the fulfillment of the great whore of Revelation. And for many centuries thereafter, up until the 1940s, all Protestant churches, all of them, recognized, how could they not? If you read these damn things for what they say, there's no question that they apply to the Catholic Church. All Protestant churches, once again, recognized the Catholic Church as the Antichrist power. Up until the 1940s, ecumenism did away with all that. Unreal. In just a few decades, look what they've accomplished. The whole Protestant world, almost without exception, is sticking their head in the lion's mouth once again, guys. We're ripe for this bitch of an institution to arise to full power once again. Under the Jew world order, guys, that's what they intend. They intend for it to have, to regain the power that it once had, because it's under the control of the third faction now, the secret societies. Speaking of the Pope and his alleged authority, here's the passage I was just making reference to in its exact wording. I read this a few weeks back, talking about the Catholic Church's phony claims to power. But here it is again in this context. The Pope is, as it were, God on earth. Now, I got to stop right there. Is that, once again, not the definition of blasphemy? It is. Blasphemy is to assume roles for yourself that belong supposedly to God, right? Here it is. Catholic Church fulfills this prophecy. It says, upon his head was written the name of blasphemy. Yes, the Catholic Church is a blasphemous entity. The Pope is, as it were, God on earth. I rest my case. By their own admission, they're blasphemers. I mean, who cares? Blaspheming Yahweh. Yahweh's a piece of shit, pardon my French. But biblically speaking, if you're a Bible dupe and you believe in the Bible, you can't embrace Catholicism. You can't. If you claim to be a Christian, you must reject Catholicism. If you accept Catholicism, you must reject Christianity. You can't believe in both. Which is why, up until more recent decades since ecumenism, the Catholic Church was not called a Christian church. You were asked, what religion are you? Are you Christian or Catholic? Even the Catholic Church itself prided itself on being its own entity. It claimed to be following Christ, but it didn't claim to be a Christian religion. That's, again, something that's arisen in more recent decades. So, quite obviously, I'll be continuing this into tomorrow's show as well. But anyway, here's the rest of this quote. The Pope is, as it were, God on earth, sole sovereign of the faithful of Christ, chief King of Kings. There's more blasphemy for you right there. King of Kings is supposed to be a title that applies only to Dada, Yaya, and Little Junior. And yet, here's his not-so-holiness laying claim to this title for himself. Chief King of Kings, having plenitude of power, to whom has been entrusted by the omnipotent God direction not only of the earthly, but also of the heavenly kingdom. The Pope is so great. The Pope is of so great authority and power that he can modify, explain, or interpret even divine law. The Pope can modify divine law since his power is not of man but of God. Whatever the Lord himself and Redeemer is said to do, that his vicar does. Again, guys, that's the very definition of Antichrist. To say that whatever the Lord and Redeemer is said to do, that the Pope can do as well. That is Antichrist. Antichrist means, once again, in place of Christ, to assume the role that the Bible says belongs to Christ alone. So the Pope is the Antichrist. Absolutely. There have been other antichrists down through the centuries, people who have done that same thing, yes. But the Antichrist power mentioned in Bible prophecy, not wink wink, is the goddamn Pope and his little papal power. No question. From this same church authority, Lucius Ferraris, we read this set of comments about the Pope. The Pope is of so great dignity and so exalted that he is not a mere man, but as it were God and the vicar of God. The Pope is of such lofty and supreme authority that, properly speaking, he has not been established in any rank of dignity, but rather has been placed upon the very summit of all ranks of dignities. The Pope is called most holy because he is rightly presumed to be such. The Pope alone is deservedly called by the name most holy because he alone is the vicar of Christ. He is likewise the divine monarch and supreme emperor and king of kings. Hence the Pope is crowned with a triple crown as king of heaven and of earth and of the lower regions. Moreover, the superiority and the power of the Pope by no means pertain only to heavenly things, to earthly things, and to things under the earth, but are even over the angels than whom he is greater, so that if it were possible that an angel might err in the faith, he could be judged and excommunicated by the Pope. For he is of so great dignity and power that he forms one and the same tribunal with Christ. Once again, Antichrist. To say that he forms one and the same tribunal with Christ meets the very definition of Antichrist. At the fourth session of the Fifth Lateran Council, Christopher Marcellus, in an oration to the Pope, exclaimed, "Thou art the shepherd, thou art the physician, Thou art the director. Thou art the husbandman. Finally, thou art another God on earth. Unbelievable. And such statements like this, of course, are embraced by the Catholic Church. That quote came from P. Joannis Harduin's Acta Conciliorum, Volume 9. It's an official Catholic publication, guys. They endorse this. Thou art another God on earth. This isn't just some radical Catholic making a statement like this, or a Protestant trying to demonize the Catholic Church. These are official goddamn Catholic frickin' sources we're citing here. The most authoritative Catholic sources. The Catholic National, a big-time popular Catholic publication, 1895 edition, stated, quote, the Pope is not only the representative of Jesus Christ, but he is Jesus Christ himself, hidden under a veil of flesh. Again, Antichrist. The Catholic Church also exalts its priests to godlike status. And one of the best examples of this that you could possibly cite, guys, is a very popular book to this day that is still used in some Catholic seminaries in the training of priests. It's called Dignities and Duties of the Priest, written by Alphonsus de Liguori, an 18th century Roman Catholic doctor of the faith. A highly praised and revered instruction manual for priests. And look what it says. The priest holds the place of the Savior himself when, by saying, I thee absolve, he absolves from sin. The priest holds the place of the Savior himself. I rest my case, guys. To prove the Catholic Church is the Antichrist, all you got to do is quote from Catholic sources. They'll tell you, once you understand what the word Antichrist means. To pardon a single sin requires all the omnipotence of God. But what only God can do by his omnipotence, the priest can do also by saying, I thee absolve, or ego te absolvo in the Latin. This is freaking unbelievable. If you believe in God and to read this stuff and realize this is official Catholic teaching, this would, have to be called an abomination, right? She is the mother of abominations of the earth, says the book of Revelation. Pope Innocent III, he went on to say, he's quoting from him. Pope Innocent III wrote, indeed, it is not too much to say that in view of the sublimity of their offices, the priests are so many gods. So here now the priest, just like the Pope in previous quotes, the priest is also exalted to godhood, to godlike status. The priest holds the place of the Savior himself. So here we see that both the Pope and even priests are exalted to such a degree that they are made Antichrist. Yes. To say that they can forgive sins would meet the definition, definitely meets the definition of Antichrist. The priest has the power of the keys, it says, or power of delivering sinners from hell, of making them worthy of paradise, and God himself is obliged to abide by the judgments of his priests. He shall speak great words against the Most High. Most High, my ass. But nevertheless, guys, does the Catholic Church meet that identifying mark? Absolutely. St. Francis of Assisi once said, if I saw an angel and a priest, I would bow my knees first to the priest and then to the angel. That's also quoted from Dignities and Duties of the Priest, page 31. Regarding the Catholic Mass or the Eucharistic celebration, Dignities and Duties of the Priest makes these outrageous comments. Listen to this. But our wonder should be far greater when we find that in obedience to the words of his priests, hoc est corpus meum, or this is my body, God himself descends upon the altar, that he comes whenever they call him, and as often as they call him, and places himself in their hands, even though they should be his enemies. Did you catch this? God, or Jesus, supposedly as God, places himself completely in the hands of the priest when he says the magic words, ego te absolvo. He is obliged to abide and, follow the priest's commands, even if these priests be his enemies. Oh, yeah, whatever. And after having come, says Alphonsus de Ligori, after having come, he remains entirely at their disposal. They move him as they please from one place to another. They may, if they wish, shut him up in the tabernacle, or expose him on the altar, or carry him outside the church. They may, if they choose, eat his flesh, and give him for the food of others. Oh, how very great is their power, says St. Lawrence Justinian, speaking of priests. A word falls from their lips, and the body of Christ, they are substantially formed from the matter of bread, and the incarnate word descended from heaven is found really present on the table of the altar. This is astonishing, guys. You realize most Catholics don't even have a clue that the church teaches this stuff. And I would venture to say that a good many of them anyway, if they were shown these quotes, they probably crap themselves. They wouldn't believe that you were accurately quoting from it. But if they were to undertake the initiative of getting themselves a copy of this book or any of these other books I'm quoting from here and read it for themselves to see what the church really does teach, I would bet a good many of them, for conscience sake, would have to leave this damn cult. How could they not? How could they stay part of something that does something like this when they believe in the great Yahweh? They think he's the wonderful, loving, almighty, heavenly benefactor up there. How could they be a part of a system that blasphemes his great name? Like I said, if you insist on being a member of the Jewish branch religion called Christianity, you have to part ways with this frickin' cult. You can't be a part of it and claim to be a follower of the great Jesus. You just can't do it, because this institution is Antichrist. This quote goes on to say, again, dignities and duties of the priest. Listen to this, guys. Again, blasphemy. It was not necessary for the Redeemer to die to save the world. The priest holds the power of the Savior himself. That's blasphemy. Does any other church do this? Certainly not any other, Christian church. No. They don't. This is the power that these quote-unquote prophecies is talking about. He shall speak great words against the Most High. He shall magnify himself above all that is called God. How much she has glorified herself, John says. Listen to this, guys. If you are supposed to be a Christian following Jesus and recognize that he's the Redeemer, how can this institution come along and try to pawn itself off as a follower of Jesus when it makes statements like this? It was not necessary for the Redeemer to die to save the world, because the priest holds the power of the Savior himself. He absolves from sin. It's freaking unbelievable. Again, this is blasphemy. This is Antichrist. The priest may, in a certain manner, be called the creator of his creator, since by saying the words of consecration, he creates, as it were, Jesus. The words of the priest create Jesus Christ. Excuse me. So now they have, De Ligori has the priest exalted to creator status, not just creator, but creator of his creator. The power of the priest, says Saint Bernardine, again, this is De Ligori quoting here. The power of the priest, says Saint Bernardine of Siena, is the power of the divine person. For the transubstantiation of bread, turning the bread into the body of Jesus, requires as much power as the creation of the world. Talk about magic and witchcraft. There you go. This is the ultimate magic witchcraft thing going on here, to claim that, the priest actually has the power to create Jesus Christ. Unbelievable. Yeah, I said this before. Let me say it again in this context. It's kind of humorous. The term hocus pocus that, magicians are supposed to use. Do you know where that comes from? It comes from what I just read a moment ago. The priest's words, the Catholic priest's words, hoc est corpus meum. Hoc est became hocus, and then they just put pocus on there to rhyme with it. But it comes from hoc est corpus meum, the magic words that supposedly magically transformed the bread into the body of Jesus. Protestants later came along with this idea, hocus pocus, you and your hocus pocus, your magic words that you claim magically transformed the bread into the Bible never says that the Last Supper that Jesus initiated was a magic show where you're turning the bread into his body and the wine into his blood. He never says that. He simply says, do this in remembrance of me. It's just a memorial service is what it is, so that you reflect back on the cross and him supposedly dying for your sins. The Catholic Church turned it into a literal sacrifice. That's what I call it, the sacrifice of the Mass. They claim that they are literally re-sacrificing Jesus on the cross when they engage in their little frickin' Mass, their Eucharist service. That they're sacrificing him again on the altar, and that when you eat the bread, you're eating his flesh and drinking his blood. It's so goddamn hideous. But notice, guys, the priest has the power of the divine person. If he can create Jesus out of a piece of bread through his little magic incantation, hocus pocus, or hoc est corpus meum, then he has even greater power than God. He creates God himself. How much she boasts, the prophecy says. She magnifies herself above all that is called God. Paul says he sits in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Who else, pray tell, could this possibly apply to? The Roman Church even claims a monopoly, of course, on salvation. Pope Boniface XIII, for example, in his decree of November 13th, 1303, there's a bunch of 13s for you, huh? Pope Boniface XIII was the Pope in the 1300s. And on November 13th of 1303, in his decree called Unum Sanctum, he stated, urged on by our faith, we are obliged to believe and hold that there is one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. Outside of her, there is no salvation. Again, Antichrist. The Bible says that you supposedly need Jesus for salvation, but Rome says no. All you need is the Catholic Church now. Outside of her, there's no salvation. The papacy has also exalted Mary, of course, their little virgin mother goddess, to an exalted level that rivals the pagan goddesses of old. The fall 1991 issue of the Catholic periodical, the Fatima Crusader, had this to say about the Blessed Mary. Oh, how many blessed souls are now in heaven who would never have been there had not Mary, by her powerful intercession, led them thither. St. Bonaventure says that the gates of heaven will open to all who confide in the protection of Mary. Yeah, I'm not going to read this whole thing. It's pretty lengthy. You get the idea. I've read this stuff before, actually not too long ago, the whole show the Mary bitch. So, you can either request these notes and read them for yourself later or whatever. But it just goes on, paragraph after paragraph, exalting Mary. She's the way to salvation. It tells the story of how this monk supposedly had a vision of a white and a red ladder. Mary stood at the top of the white ladder. Jesus stood at the top of the red one. Imagine that. Mary got the pure white ladder. And in this dream, the monk tried to climb the red ladder to reach heaven, but he couldn't do it. But as soon as he took that first step on the white ladder, Mary reached down and pulled him up into heaven. In other words, you can't get to heaven through Jesus. He doesn't care. He's up there with his arms folded. But as soon as you turn to Mary, she's so anxious to reach down and assist you to ensure that you get to heaven. So turn to Mary rather than Jesus. Once again, guys, biblically speaking, that's blasphemy, right? This church does speak words against the Most High. The royal bloodline was exposing this church for what it was. Of course, they needed a document to expose them for what they were too, but nevertheless, they're right. The Antichrist prophecies, quote unquote, do apply only, exclusively to the Catholic Church. Malachi Martin, in his book, Keys of this Blood, once again, stated that on December 8, 1978, Pope John Paul II declared, quote, the entire history of man is, in fact, pervaded by a tremendous struggle against the force of evil in the world. This Pope desires to commit the Church in a special way to Mary, in whom the stupendous and total victory of good over evil, of love over hate, of grace over sin is achieved. Did you catch that? Pope John Paul II says that the victory of good over evil, of love over hate, of grace over sin is achieved through Mary? On December 12th, 1531, an apparition of Mary is said to have occurred. On that date, this Mary allegedly told Juan Diego of Mexico, quote, I am the merciful mother of all mankind. Listen, my son, she said, to what I tell you now. Do not be troubled nor disturbed by anything. Do not fear illness nor any other distressing occurrence, nor pain. Am I not your mother? Am I not life and health? Have I not placed you on my lap and made you my responsibility? Do you need anything else? She asks. This is a quote I lifted directly from the Fatima Crusader, a popular Catholic publication, summer 1994 issue. Do you need anything else? Once again, guys, Catholic Church handsomely meets the identifying marks of the Antichrist in so very many ways. But here we see Antichrist again. Here we see blasphemy asserting itself in the place of the great Yah and in the place of Jesus. You don't need anything else. That includes Jesus. You don't need anything to get to heaven, to achieve salvation. All you need is Jesus and the popes and the priests and the Catholic Church itself. It replaces Christ, does it not? And is that not the definition of Antichrist? Is that not the definition of blasphemy? Of course it is. The Catholic Church, once again, is the chief blasphemer, the chief Antichrist power. The prophecies of the Antichrist also tell us that this power would wear out the saints of the Most High. Daniel 7:21 words it this way: I beheld, and the same horn, the little horn, made war with the saints and prevailed against them. Daniel 7:25 says, it shall wear out the saints of the Most High. Revelation 13:8 says, and it was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. Revelation 17:6, and I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. Revelation 18:24 says, and in her, the whore, in her was found the blood of the prophets and of the saints and of all that was slain upon the earth. You find this also in Daniel 11:33, Matthew 24:9, on and on. Anyway, it hardly requires elaboration, ladies and gentlemen, to demonstrate how the papal power is accurately described with this aspect of the Antichrist prophecies. That it would war against the saints. But nevertheless, let's look at some revealing quotes, should you have any doubt. This comes from William H. Leckey's History of the Rise and Influence of the Spirit of Rationalism in Europe, Volume 1, a classic historical work. You know, some Catholic sources will admit that they've committed some atrocities in the past, and that's good. Hats off to them. I don't know how you could want to be a part of a bitch of an institution like that, especially when it still boasts to this day that it's never erred in matters of faith and morals. Can you really honestly say that you support an institution like that if you recognize it's been a murderous, bloodthirsty, tyrannical bitch of a system in the past, and yet it has no lament, no remorse for its past crimes, boasts that it's never erred in matters of faith and morals? How the hell can you possibly ally yourself with a bitch institution like that? You must not really be opposed to it, or you're ignorant of these claims. Now that you're not, if you're listening to this show, and you probably aren't, because who would listen to this show believing in this bullshit? But should you become aware that your church boasts never erred, and yet you claim to be against mass murder, and you still want to be a part of it?